For those of you who do not know, so this is Dr. Jack Forbush. He is a DO. He is a Unicom alum. So I don't know, were either of you two looking at going to UNE at all, possibly, or not sure? Maybe. Okay, that's fine. That's cool. So he, actually, like, Dr. Forbush, I'll let you introduce yourself. You probably would do it way better than I would do it.
Oh,
I would
no,
just
no, you're
butcher
doing
it.
fine. No, I'm a Mainer. I'm originally from Holton, and worked as an EMT, firefighter, paramedic, and then went to nursing school in the county, Northern Maine Vocational Technical Institute, subsequently known as Northern Maine Community College now, I think. And worked as a nurse for a number of years. Then went to medical school here in Maine at UNE, and then did my family medicine residency program in Bangor at Eastern Maine Medical Center, as well as doing a fellowship. Worked locally for a practice that's no longer in business. Then worked for Eastern Maine, and I've worked for St. Joe's as well. But I've been in private practice in Hamden since about 2007. Actually, since exactly 2007. So that's what I currently do, and I've kind of a bit of a different model of care, if you will, called direct primary care. So I like to say tongue in cheek that I work for patients, not the insurance companies. And as someone on the call can certainly attest, we're able to save people a crap load of money by getting obstacles like insurance companies and things like that out of the way.
It's awesome. Awesome. Absolutely. He's fantastic.
Yeah, well, thank you. But I mean, the reason I went to this model a little over 6 years ago was just really getting tired of check boxes and authorizations for everything under the sun. So I stopped working for the insurance companies and just started working for patients. So it's like a membership model like you get at the gym or Netflix or Hannaford on the Go or whatever it is. So anyway, that's me. More than happy to answer whatever questions you might have in any way, shape, or form.
Do you two have any questions before I ask him a question?
I am kind of curious as to how the coronavirus has affected you and like your practice as of now.
Sure. Excellent question, because I get asked that a lot. To be honest with you, it really hasn't affected my practice that much, and I'll tell you why. Because part of the model that we have that I have in the office is that rather than being stuck to an office visit, we take care of problems through texting, video visits, emails, and things of that nature. So I have an ongoing continuous relationship with patients. So if they have a concern, my answer is not, you need to come into the office to get this taken care of. So having that continuity of communication has been really key. So that's why I say my practice hasn't been affected a whole lot, because that's just been part and parcel with what I and what most of my patients have come to know as the new normal for them, if you will. On the flip side of it, I've taken advantage of the situation and doing a whole bunch of renovations in the office. So I was able to get asbestos removed and doing a whole front end renovations. So my answer is going to be very different than, say, the employed physician's practice, because they're used to having to see people face to face for everything under the sun.
Right.
So where a patient of a big box practice, if you will, calls and says, I have some questions or concerns about X, Y, and Z, their answer is, well, you can talk to the nurse for a bit, or you need to come in for an appointment. You know, versus with our practice, you text me or you email or call, whatever's easiest for you, and I can answer a lot of those questions relatively immediately. So really triaging what might be the issue and or the problem, and then give you some advice from the comfort of your couch. So, or I guess
awesome.
it's a couch or a food.
Yeah, no, that's a couch.
So, that's probably a little longer answer, but the short answer is not nearly as much as other practices. And I think that the relationship I've been able to build with, and patients have been able to build with me over the years, I think just provides a different level of intimacy, perhaps, or comfort. And then I can also, in nearly real time, kind of wade through all of these data points and things that are out there. Like what's, you know, I heard this on the news, I read this in the paper, my next door neighbor's third cousin's uncle's postman's brother's ex-wife told me X, Y, and Z. Or, hey, doc, what about this stuff we're hearing about hydroxychloroquine and azithromycin? Or what, like, I think it was yesterday, there was an article about using ivermectin. So I'm able to kind of tease through that in a very practical way for patients, and in a much more, I don't want to say real time, but pretty close to real time communication with patients. So, which I think leads to less fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Let's put it that way. I will tell you that in what I'm able to gather for data, my patients are infinitesimally less anxious than patients of other practices. I think that's part of that is a part of it's due to my communication with them. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Yeah.
How's that difference in communication that you've been experiencing with your patient have been mostly fueled by your ability to communicate with them? Like you said, you text them. That has obviously only been around since, I mean, regularly for like the last decade or so. Like, has technology mostly fueled that like communication, like you're meeting them with technology that they have kind of thing?
Yeah. So, I mean, I've been doing kind of texting, video visits, etc., for close to a decade. So for us, it's kind of routine, which is, you know, with a lot of other practices, they're starting from ground zero, where I've been doing this forever, it seems like. So our workflow is, both for mine, my staff, and the patients, very different than it would be for a hospital employed physician where they've never done it this way. So whether it's just the technology piece, I don't know how to set up a quote unquote Zoom meeting, or I don't know how to quote unquote text patients in a secure way. There's that piece, and there's also the piece of how do I manage diabetes by texting? Well, it's actually pretty simple. I mean, you went to medical school, for crying out loud. I'm sure you could probably figure this out, that a lot of it's just data that you need from the patient and data you can pass on to them. So did I answer your question? I feel like I didn't.
Yeah, that's kind of, it was,
Okay.
you've been doing it for a while. Yeah, more or less.
Yeah,
Also, do you have a kid? Is your kid Devin Forbush? Or do you have a kid, Devin Forbush?
Yes, he is.
So I went to middle school with one. And I was just,
yeah, that's my son. Do you have any dirt on him? I can write it down.
Funny.
Hold on, let me get a.
We're friends on Facebook.
So now, are you Emily, or are you Marielle?
We hang out in the like gravel pit by your house. I'm Emily. I went to Reedsbrook with I was like a year behind him. Anyway,
he's actually around the house.
Sorry, you said you lived in Hamden, so I wanted.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Oh,
yeah.
Funny. Small world.
He's the kid.
Cool. All right, that's the end of my questions.
Okay.
Such a small world in Maine, honestly. It's crazy.
No kidding.
So great questions, guys. You actually kind of stole some of the questions that I was going to ask, but that's good. So I was wondering, Dr. Forbush, if you could talk a little bit more just about your practice in general, because it's obvious, it's very different, like you were saying,
yep.
Which has obviously helped you in this current situation because you already kind of were prepared for all of this. But I know your staff is a little bit more, I would say, non-traditional than I would say for like a private practice and everything.
Yeah.
And so, and really, how do you even create a business, like, you know, a practice like this? Because it just sounds so awesome, but it's like, can anyone else do that?
Oh yeah. So, you know, I get that kind of question from a lot of docs across the state and nation about how do I do what you're doing, and what kind of special skill set do I need? Well, you really only need a couple of skill sets. You need to be able to add and subtract and keep a home budget. Okay, so I have $50 and I can only spend $50, but I should really spend $40 to save 10 for tomorrow in case I need to get whatever. So there's some basic budgetary intelligent tools that you need. That's number one. Number two, you have to be willing to do things that you didn't necessarily go to medical school for, i.e. cleaning and answering the phone and doing a lot of the other, whether it's nursing duty or clerical duty or scheduling duty. You have to be willing to do that. And that stuff is pretty easy to kind of create a nice little workflow. You obviously need to be a good doc. You have to have a little bit of moxie, a little bit of drive to do something very different. Other than that, you don't need, you don't need an MBA. You don't need any special other degree other than just your internal moxie, to be very honest with you. So from that standpoint, my staff are leading on to that. I have one licensed practical nurse. She works about 20 hours a week, give or take. And then I have a non-nursing staff who works 30 or 35 hours a week. I answer the phone, I don't want to say just as much as they do, but because they do the majority of it, but I answer the phone, I draw the lab tests, I schedule patients, I do all the stuff that when they're not there. So, which also leads to a different level, different relationship with folks. In fact, I think I probably draw, like for blood tests, I probably do 95% of them in the office, which is great because it gives me the opportunity to talk with patients and they, get them, see them outside of an office visit per se, but they're still, so you learn about their life and you learn about this and you learn about a whole bunch of other stuff. So it really provides a lot of nice continuity. And not to say that they don't do that as well, but you kind of divvy up all the duties, if that makes sense. So yeah, and most, most of the employed practices will have, I think the average is 3.5 staff members per doc, or 3.4 or something like that, which means nurse and MA, a scheduler, and like a referral or medical records department. Whereas we're able to do this with really 1.5 full-time equivalents. So, the overall bottom line is significantly less, and it's nice because I can pass that savings on to patients. So however we save money, I don't keep it in my pocket. I pass that savings on as much as possible. But as far as like the emails and texts, all 90-something% of the texts come to me. And then between the three of us, we divvy up the emails. So we've got a nice little filtering system. So the emails that are intended for me versus intended for Kim, the nurse, versus Betty, the scheduler, generally find their way before they cross paths with us. So, but that's how we do it. Yeah. And there's very little I don't do. So I still do pregnancy care, which to the best of my knowledge, there's no family physician for, I don't know how far, still doing pregnancy care and deliveries. My youngest patient is probably 3 weeks old now. My oldest patient is 92, give or take. I take care of moms, dads, grandparents, kids, teenagers, the list goes on. We do almost all minor surgeries in the office. So lots of dermatology stuff, if you will, lumps, bumps, moles, lacerations, toenail removals, cyst drainage, things like that. We also do a fair amount of sports medicine and ultrasound in the office. We have our own little ultrasound machine. So if someone comes in with a complaint that we can find with an ultrasound, we'll find it. I'm a DO, so I do lots of manipulative treatment. Probably at least 2/3, if not 3/4 of the visits involve some element of osteopathic treatment. Not all, but certainly a fair amount of them. We have wholesale prices on medications. So we can beat Walmart and Hannaford on the generic medications every day of the week. It's 1 or 2 cents a pill. For a lot of that stuff, maybe 5 or 7 cents. So the $4 medication at Walmart is about $7 a year for us. Or $4 a month is about $7 a year or something like that. My most notable medication savings was about an $8,000+ savings on a course of antibiotics. So, yeah, the patient was quoted about $8,900 on an antibiotic course when we got it for, I think it was $160 or $170, something crazy like that. All the lab testing, we get about 75% cheaper than anywhere else, sometimes 90%. So, but yeah, we do all that stuff right in-house. So that's that.
So you're basically a one-stop shop,
Mhm.
essentially. You just
Yeah,
do
we
all the
can.
things.
This model can provide about 90 to 95% of all the medical needs that a patient would have. So,
That's awesome.
the other. So we tell everyone you ought to have catastrophic insurance in case you break your leg and need to have surgery, or you have to go hospitalized, or you develop cancer or something. But the other 90 to 95% we provide right in the house, right in house. So that's I think it's pretty good. All for the membership price. So
Yeah,
that's it.
and I think that's also just, I mean, even though this is something you've established even before this pandemic has come out, but I mean, so many individuals' healthcare is attached to their job, and a lot of people have lost their
Right.
job. And so the
Right.
fact
Now
that
they've lost
you
their insurance.
have, right, and so now they're like, okay, now what am I going to do if I have something that's kind of minor, but I don't need to go to the emergency room because people don't
Right.
want to go to the emergency room right now.
Right.
What am I going to do? So that's a really awesome solution that you've already
Right.
have established.
One ER visit, one straightforward, relatively simple ER visit is equal to about probably 3 years of my membership as far as cost. Maybe
Wow.
4 years. Yeah. So, yeah.
That's crazy.
So I tell folks, if I save you one ER trip, then that's just covered your membership for the next several years. Now, obviously, there are things we can't do in the office, like somebody breaks their leg and they need to go to the emergency room. There are always going to be those extraneous circumstances. But again, 90 to 95% of stuff we take care of right in the office.
That's so awesome. That's so cool. Are there any other questions from the group before I keep doing my thing?
Question.
Okay.
Yes, Chrisanne.
Well, I was curious if you could give some advice to our pre-med students, because as you know, they're all completely disrupted their studies this semester by studying remotely. It's impacted their labs. It's impacted potentially some classes maybe being graded as a pass-fail, although they have the option to choose a letter grade. I mean, so this is a lot happening. MCATs are being rescheduled and canceled and moved around. I mean, there's a ton of moving parts here for these guys. So what's your best advice to them as they start to go through the application cycle? And it's, in my mind, it's kind of a interesting opportunity to be in school during a pandemic, because, many people will never see this again in their lifetime, hopefully.
Right.
But lay a foundation to maybe help them become better physicians. So how do you help them, figure this out?
So the first thing that comes to mind is that it's not all about numbers. Now, granted, you have to have a certain level of proficiency on an MCAT to be, to apply and get accepted to a medical school. But with increasing frequency, medical schools care more about who the person is rather than who they are on paper. So the reason I mention that is with all of the classroom changes and things that have gone on, that can sometimes cause an unfounded level of anxiety. Like I'm not going to get a 4.0 in this class anymore. It's going to be a pass. And how is that going to affect my admissions or my application process? I think that to a large degree, that's become less important than maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago. Not that it isn't important, but I think it's become less important as more medical schools are looking at the person as opposed to the paper. Now, that plays out in the statistics behind things. I mean, if you just look at UNE, we'll use UNE as an example. Easily a third of my class. Now, granted, this was just yesterday, as you know, Christian. But at least a third of my class were non-traditional students, meaning that they had some other occupation before they went to medical school. And I think with the exception of some of the really big, highly competitive schools, that's becoming increasingly more popular, particularly among women who are clearly outpacing male applicants. I think the current statistic is something like 54% or something, which is great, but that's clearly another dynamic that has changed. And I think that reflects in the way that they're scrutinizing the application process, right? Which is a good thing, I think. So I think that would be number one. Number two, if you're able to use this opportunity to garner or gather some non-classroom exposure or experience, I mean. So for example, if I know they've got the Bass Park tent, and I'm not saying you need to get on the front line of being exposed to COVID, but certainly being involved in some type of incident management. And this is I mean, hopefully we'll never see this again, but this is another great example to just have that exposure to see how things work well and see how things don't work well. And hopefully we won't experience this in the future, but if we do, you'll have that experience to take forward. So I think that's the second thing. And I had a third thing, but I have no idea what it is now. I have no idea what it is.
Great, thank
It's fine.
you.
You were doing great. And I think Marielle, did you have a question as well?
I was just wondering, kind of back to like your dynamic at your practice, about how many patients do you see a day versus like what the normal practice clinic might see?
I probably see 12 to 14 patients a day, and that's over the course. So Mondays and Fridays are half day, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays are full day. So yeah, I think it's probably, we'll say 14 to 15 just as an average. Now, if you contrast that against a employed practice, they probably see twice that, sometimes even 3 times that. So it's a very much a one problem, one visit, make another appointment kind of workflow, if you will. Most of their, and I can speak because I used to work for these people too. They would schedule patients every 15 minutes. Our schedule is, our appointments are 30 to 60 minutes long. So default is 30. If you need longer, that's not a problem. Well, preventive healthcare visits like annual physicals and well child checks are all an hour long to make sure that folks are getting all their questions answered. So our volume of patients is much more relaxed. Having said that, it's been my observation that it's more efficient. So let's say you come in because you have, not that you do, but let's pick the trifecta of chronic disease: heart disease, high cholesterol, and diabetes. So if you come in to go into one of the big box places, they're going to manage your diabetes, pay to come back at some unspecified period of time to talk about your cholesterol, and then another visit to talk about this. And heaven forbid that you have other questions or burning complaints that need to be addressed, you've got to schedule another appointment. Contrast that with the way we operate. As you come in, we've got our agenda, if you will, things that we need to make sure we've taken care of. And then I look at the patient and say, where's your list? What questions do you have? What would you like to talk about today? And if they have none, fine. If they do, then go right ahead. So I don't have any heartburn or problem with what we call the oh, by the way, or the doorknob question, where the doc's getting ready to leave and the patient says, oh, by the way, I have this. I welcome them. Bring your list, bring your questions, whatever you have. And kind of what's funny is folks will say, well, I don't want to take up too much of your time. My response is, it's actually your time that you're taking up. So why don't you maximize it? You're not wasting any of my time. I've got the next 30 minutes scheduled out for you. If you only want 15 of it, that's fine. If you need 45, that's not a problem. We'll just, we'll schedule for 45 next time, or when you come in. So. Yeah.
Awesome. So, so we're getting close to the end of our time here. So this has been fantastic. I've been learning so much. This is great. I really did this for me. This isn't for the students. No, just kidding. So, are there any other burning questions that you guys have for Dr. Forbush before we kind of start to close in on this lovely session?
Yeah, you said you were in nursing for a while. Was your ultimate goal to be a DO, or did you get into nursing and then realize you wanted to do more?
That's a very interesting story with a somewhat circuitous and long answer. When I went through nursing school, I had no intent of going to medical school, none whatsoever. I went from being a EMT, firefighter, paramedic to nursing because I didn't want to be hauling 400-pound people down 3 flights of stairs in a house built in 1880. So I thought that nursing would be a good solid career move, and that would be my career. And making a very long story short, some things in life you make a decision about, and other things in life the decision's made for you. And I don't want to sound overly philosophical or spiritual, but it was not my intent to go to medical school. And despite me kicking and screaming, I ended up there anyway. So that's that. Now, having said that, I am so retrospectively looking at this. I will, in full transparency, I love being a DO. I think that we bring a lot more tools to the table, and nothing against MDs. Please don't misunderstand me. We just bring a lot more to the table than what you would otherwise get in an MD school. And we have medical students coming in the office all the time, and we're part of the Tufts CAP program. So a student comes and spends every other week they spend 2 days with us, and universally every single student that I've had so far has said, I wished I'd gone to a DO school, just because they see what the extra stuff that we bring in. So now, having said that, we don't, UNE is not a big research facility like Tufts, so it's a plus and minus. It really depends on what you want to go into, but I'm jaded, so that's fine. But I'm jaded because of what I do now. So,
do you think that applies?
Oh, I'm sorry, you were broken up there.
Do you think that applies, or that, like, sorry, I know my internet's terrible. Do you think that applies more to, like, your family practice, or do you think that applies also to other specialties?
I think it applies to pretty much all, with the exception of maybe, so if I understood your question, does it apply just to primary care, family medicine, or does it also apply to other specialty fields? I think with the exception of radiology and perhaps psychiatry and maybe dermatology, it applies to all of the fields of medicine, just to different degrees. So certainly much more in the primary care specialties, internal medicine, pediatrics, OB, and family medicine, but it still has an enormous amount of applicability to neurosurgery, to general surgery, to cardiology, to rheumatology. And like I said, so unless you don't interact with the patient, radiology, pathology, or you're in a field that, like psychiatry, where you have to be very careful about patient boundaries, then it's going to apply. It'll apply less in those fields. But everything else, it's got a pretty wide range of applicability, to be very honest with you.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So, okay, Emily, I can relay what he said to you in an email later. Also, this is also recorded, so I can just share this with you so you can see the amazing response he gave to your question. It's just so articulate. Okay, well, that is the end of our session, unless there are any other questions or any words of wisdom that Dr. Forbush would like to relay to those who are watching.
The only thing I would say is, as you and Chris Ann know, we love having undergrad students in the office. We're a little slower at the moment because of the renovations and the stay-at-home sort of thing. But we love having students in the office, and you can just contact us to schedule some time with Betty. We generally have a fairly steady flow of a variety of folks in different stages of learning: undergraduate, graduate, residency, fellows, practicing docs who want to learn about this model. So more than welcome to come on in, spend a few days with us if you find it helpful. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I know I've had some students talk to me about their experience shadowing Dr. Forbush, and they only had amazing things to talk about. So definitely take advantage of that.
I paid them to do that. That's what happened.
Well, whatever. It's still great. It's a great experience for you to see that. And so thank you all again so much for joining the first Sip and Sit series or
Thank
sit and
you.
sip, whatever the version is.
Thank
I
you
don't
very
even
much,
remember.
folks.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so
Yeah.
much, Dr. Forbush. Goodbye, everybody.
Thank
See you
you.
later now.
Bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you.
Come see.